In July 2017, a few weeks after the conclusion of Doctor Who Series 10, or Season 36, Jodie Whittaker was announced to be playing the 13th incarnation of the Doctor, who would begin her tenure in Series 11, or Season 37. Last month, in October 2022, the 13th Doctor's era concluded with The Power of the Doctor, the 2022 BBC Centenary special. The 13th Doctor's era covered 24 stories over 31 episodes, or 25 over 32 if you count Twice Upon a Time. However, was this era of the show a success, or was it not a success? Or was it a bit of both? Hello, ladies and gentlemen, Nick here, and welcome to the 7th and final part of my Doctor Who, the 13th Doctor reflection videos. Conclusion. Before I begin, if you haven't seen parts 0 through to 6, please do check those out. Part 0 is the introduction, basically explains the format, the point of the series, etc. Part 1 covers Series 11 and Resolution. Part 2, Series 12 and Revolution of the Daleks. Part 3, Series 13, Flux. Plus Eve of the Daleks and Legend of the Sea Devils. Part 4, The Power of the Doctor, and the arcs of the era, and how the tied in with that episode. Plus, I also despair about the Timeless Child arc. It's not like YouTube hasn't got enough of those, am I right? And then part 5 was a bonus video about Doctor Who Redacted, and if I called it part 6, it's part 5, and if I called this part 7, it's not, it's part 6. Welcome to part 6. This is Doctor Who, the 13th Doctor's era reflections conclusion. Okay, so the Jodie Whittaker era. Now, personal opinion, this is a mixed bag. I mean, quite a lot of the eras are a bit of a mixed bag, but there's some that are more pro than not so pro. Like the David Tennant era is more of a pro. Chris Rexon, obviously. John Pertwee's, I suppose I would say, more of a pro. Sylvester McCoy is more yay than nay. And the first half of Tom Baker's era are pro. 60s ones I struggle with a bit more when it comes to filtering out the whole eras and stuff, unlike later ones, because there's so much in the 60s. So it's a bit harder, but I would say mostly a pro for them. As for others, well, most of Tom Baker's stuff after season 14, not quite as great, apart from most of season 16 and the occasional other great story, such as City of Fucking Awesome Death. The 5th Doctor is a bit of a mixed bag. It's great. The last season is great, but the first two, not so much. The 6th Doctor, I do enjoy season 22, but I get the criticisms. And Trial of the Time Lord was in a similar situation to Flux, where it could have been better, but they at least got something out. And the 11th and 12th Doctor's era. 11's, it was kind of a bit mixed. And 12, it started off a bit weak, but had a great final season. So what about 13? What's 13's era like? It's interesting, because we got three... I'd say most... I'm sure when I come around to ranking all 39 seasons, they're gonna come somewhere around the 20s. They're not all early 30s, maybe for Series 12, but yeah, they're all right, I guess. Personally, I know lots of people aren't fans of them. I know some people are quite fond of them, and I know some of them are more popular than others. For example, Series 13 got a bit more of a appraisal from fans than Series 11 and 12. But on the other hand, I know some people who would put it as their least favourite of the new series, not just the Whittaker era, the whole of the new series. You know, some people aren't fond of Series 11 because of the script. Some people aren't fond of it because it doesn't have an arc, series arc. And of course, Series 12 is super duper divisive, not just because episodes 5 and 10, but the series itself is still a pretty divisive season as a whole. but mostly episode 10. As for the 5 specials, apart from one, they're pretty much well received by the fans. Okay, another one isn't as well received as the other 3, but it's still got a decent reputation. But there's one special that didn't do very well, but the others did at worst decent and at best lauded. Yeah, we do have a couple of episodes in this series that have been lauded. Not just by 13 era stands or simps, or people who 13 was their first Doctor, or was the one that made them enjoy the show, or if they've been watching for only like 11 and 12 maybe, and this one was like, this is where they raised their interest in. Of course, there's also fans from starting with 11 and 12 who would probably prefer them, or maybe older Doctors. I'm a fan who started watching with halfway through David Tennant's first series, but I did see a pair of Chris Dragglestons beforehand and one David Tennant, and then saw the rest of Series 2, and then after Series 2 ended, BBC 3 repeated all of Series 1 and 2 and Christmas Invasion before Runaway Bride came on, so I saw all of the new series episodes by the time Runaway Bride had aired, even though I'd only started watching the show properly halfway through the second series, but had managed to catch up in time for the Christmas special that year. And over the time I continued to watch the show since then, new episodes going forwards, and then going back to check out the older episodes. It took a couple of years to do all of them, but by the time Series 11 started airing, I'd seen every single story, missing episodes through reconstruction or the animations. In the case of the episodes that got animations after 2018, I saw the reconstructions for those and then the animations after that. Series 11 felt very different at the time when I watched it. It felt, yeah, this does feel different. Series 5 didn't feel that, it did feel different to Series 4, but it still felt like Doctor Who. Series 11, well, it was still Doctor Who, but it felt more different Doctor Who to Series 10, which was both refreshing but also a tad bit jarring. This was slightly unusual feeling. By the time I came to rewatch the series for the revisitation reviews for 2021, just sunk in, just like every other era. So yeah, it didn't feel as different or even as jarring or refreshing as it had done in 2018-19. It felt like a different era to the previous one or the next one, like they all do. So it kind of sunk in a few years later, and I think Series 12 kind of helped with that because I was used to it by then. The Series 12, so I was used to what Series 11 was like. So going back to see Series 11 again, it just kind of, this just feels like it's just a different era of Doctor Who, but it kind of sinks in. I can just watch these episodes like I can something from like Series 3 or Series 7 or Season 23 or Season 19 or Season 15 or Season 7 or something, or Season 2. It just, I could just check this out like a kid. It's like something from one of the other 36 seasons, and so it kind of just sunk in that way. For seasons 37 to 39. 38, 37, 38 to begin with, and then 39 afterwards. But yeah, the era's, that's a success, I suppose, on that. They did a refresh. It is pretty different to what came before, but only to begin with, and then it kind of sinks in later on down the line. What's interesting is each of these 3 seasons are also quite radically different to each other. Series 11 is definitely trying to get newer people on board with the series, which makes a lot of sense. It's the first one, and focus more on these new characters going off on standalone adventures for the most part. Series 12, on the other hand, has a much more concern about references and bringing back monsters from the past and some of the lore and changing of the continuity for better or for worse. And it does feel quite significant difference. Also, Series 11 stories can be a little bit slower in places. In some cases, fans found them a little dull at times. But Series 12 has a lot of episodes that had a lot of stuff going on and just overfilling of things that they were filled to bursting point. Series 13 would continue that, but at least expanding it to a single story over 6 episodes rather than what Series 12 did. The thing I preferred over Series 12 over Series 11 because it was the fact that it was trying to move on, and I feel like it was part of this overall show again, but still focusing on these characters and the universe they paired with. But what's made it weaker than Series 11 on reflection is that it doesn't quite work as an overall series. There are so many episodes that don't have any involvement with the arc or contribute very little to the character stuff. And they just kind of feel like more of the same from Series 11, except not as interesting because we've already done that before. And now it's time to move on. I wanted something more like Resolution or Spyfall, but no, I got Orphan fucking 55. And Can You Hear Me was basically had the right ideas, but not really heading in the right direction. For example, I suppose what really lets Series 12 down is that it does have this big series arc, but it doesn't really do anything with it until the last episode. And then it's huge, it's game-changing, and we don't really do much with it. Granted, Series 13 was made under pandemic restrictions, but yeah, there was still plenty of time. And I've already discussed this a few times before, I won't go into it. See, I did like how Series 13 did try to do a 6-part story, one single story akin to Trial of a Time Lord's 14-part single story, or Torchwood's Children of Earth, Series 3 of that series, being a 5-part story. I guess I could say the same for Miracle Day over 10. However, the problem with Flux is it doesn't really all connect or gel at the end. There's like this whole setup in the first one, and we're wondering where's all this going, and then it kind of gets disappointing with the 5th one, especially when it spends half its time playing with Unit's backstory and just meandering. Episode 5 meanders, and then we come to a kind of slightly disappointing conclusion with The Vanquishers, where it's still the best series finale of the 3 seasons. However, if we're in the specials, Powder Doctor's the best. Speaking of the specials, again, if we were to put these ones in their own categories, it's slightly a bit bag. Whilst Powder Doctor and even the Daleks are amazing, and Resolution is also brilliant, Revolution of the Daleks suffers from some of the issues that other Series 12 episodes had, as well as some of the ones from Series 13, and let's not even talk about Legend of the Sea Devils. What a disappointment. We were so excited for the return of the Sea Devils, and then... No, I said I wouldn't talk about it. I won't be one of those YouTubers who say, I won't talk about it, but then I do mention it, a little bit about it. No, I shouldn't do that. That's hypocritical. But, yeah. So, on a personal note, this is an extremely mixed season. For every brilliant episodes like Rosa, or Demons of the Punjab, The Haunting of Villa Diodati, War of the Sontarans, Village of the Angels, Eve of the Daleks. That's just the 10 out of 10 ones. Spoiler alert for the upcoming Powder Doctor review. There's some other brilliant ones, like Woman Who Fell to Earth, Kablam, despite the dodgy political stand, Resolution, Spyfall, mainly part 1, Nikola Tesla's Night of Terror, Fugitive of the Jadoon, despite the reveal of who the fugitive is, Revolution of the Daleks to an extent. I would have said Halloween Apocalypse at the time of its airing, same for The Vanquishers, but maybe not so much now. And The Power of the Doctor being an epic climax. And heck, quite a few episodes of Series 11 I think are pretty good. Ghost Monument, even if it's quite slow. Witchfinders, even if the ending's a bit of a dud. In fact, if it wasn't for that ending, it probably would have joined the brilliant episodes list. It takes you away. It took me a bit of time to like the episode more than I did. But I thought the character stuff was pretty great. Even if, again, there's not much on a plot-wise, but there's still some decent stuff. Spyfall Part 2. Praxis was alright. And, those were pretty good. And Can You Hear Me had the right ideas, but didn't really develop them as well as they could have been. I think Vincent's and the Doctor is a better mental illness awareness episode of the show than Can You Hear Me is. However, for all of these good episodes and all of the brilliant episodes, there's a couple of not so good ones. Arachnids in the UK is not that great. Saranga Conundrum is probably the most pointless episode of the entire era. Orphan 55 is a close second. Battle of Ranskorav Kolos really shows off its first draftness when we watch it, because it definitely feels like a first draft. Orphan 55, need I say more? Ascension of the Cybermen might have been a good one if they focused either more on the Cyberman stuff and or tied it into what was going to happen in the next episode, relieving that of some of the amount of stuff it had to do, as well as maybe make it a bit more of a smoother story. Maybe by doing that, it could have cut out, I don't know, maybe the fucking Brendan scenes. Timeless Children. Need I say more? Survivors of the Flux, the most pointless episode of Flux, and Legend of the Sea Devils, which was a massive disappointment. I didn't mention Once Upon a Time or The Vanquishers because those ones did have some enjoyability, but I don't think they're that... I think they're okay. Oh, and if we include Twice Upon a Time, terrible. Even worse than Orphan 55, which is my least favourite story from this era. Enough said. So, episode-wise, mixed bag. What about the characters? Well, as I mentioned in part 4 about the 13th Doctor, I feel like my personal favourite interpretation of her is Haunting of Villa Diatarty in Series 12, and how she is in Series 13 onwards. To the most part, where it's kind of taken what we saw in 11, as well as the darker stuff from Series 12, and kind of merges into a decent blend. I'd still say she's one of the weaker incarnations, and Jodie Whittaker is one of the lower down on the list actors. Like, if I was ranking the actors, the best actors, she'd be lower down, which is no disrespect on her. She's still brilliant. Same for her Doctor, but they'd be lower down on the rankings in terms of their characters. But I think their best moments are their best episodes of Haunting of Villa Diadarty and Series 13 and specials. Outside the Phasmin stuff. Speaking of Phasmin, Yasmin Khan, the most notable companion of the 13th Doctor's era, even if she may have not started out as the main companion, she ended up becoming the most notable. A bit like Jamie McCrimmon from the 2nd Doctor's era. For the 13th Doctor's era, Yaz is the main companion overall, even if, like Jamie and Tegan, she may have started as maybe 2nd or 3rd on the list, but then would be bumped up to 1st when another newbie would join the TARDIS. For example, Ben and Polly, Jamie would be like the 3rd companion after them, so the main companions would be those two, and then it was Jamie. With Tegan, Adric and Nyssa were technically introduced first. However, when those ones would go, Jamie would be the main companion above Victoria and later Zoe, and Tegan the same above Turlo and later Chameleon, with Turlo then taking her position before Perry took over. If that makes any sense. But yeah, I feel like I have to agree, Yaz didn't get much character growth in the first series she was in. A few bits with her family in there, like arachnids and demons dealt with her family. And we saw them again in Spyfall Parts 1 and 2, and her sister appeared twice more in Can You Hear Me and Once Upon a Time. But unfortunately, we don't get to see her family that much, or she doesn't talk about them that much else. And outside of those episodes, there's only a few other mentions of it, as well as some of her personal backstory. However, Can You Hear Me does see a bit more of what she used to be like, or what happens to her back in her past before the events of that episode. In fact, and before the first episode of Series 11. And Series 12 does delve into her personality a bit more, and then Series 13 brings forward the fan theory Phasmin ship, and then makes it canon for the specials. Where's that party I promised at the end of the last video for the LGBT plus support? Come on, there's supposed to be a party for it. Come on. However, whilst Yaz may be the most notable 13th Doctor companion, Graham is the best. At least, mainly because Bradley Walsh is fantastic in the role. But I loved his character portrayal and dynamic with the Doctor and company. especially with Ryan over Series 11. He was such a great character in Series 11, and Graham was just so brilliant. Traveling across time and space to grieve over his past wife, played by Sharon D. Clarke, who probably would have been the best companion if she hadn't died. Or if she didn't become a companion, great the best supporting character. Or at least prior to Series 13, anyway. But yeah, Graham's awesome. Bradley Walsh is awesome. Enough said. Apart from the fact that the character was more awesome in Series 11 than he was in Series 12, but he was still pretty awesome, and Bradley Walsh has remained awesome over the entire run, and it was fantastic to see him back in Power of the Doctor. Ryan, on the other hand, wasn't as fond of him or Yaz as Graham in Series 11, but Series 11 definitely focused on him and Graham as a character duo on out of the companions, and how they work together and stuff. And I felt Ryan got better as a character over time. Tosin Cole's performance got better over time. It Takes You Away's ending and Battle Wan Skorav Colossus are definitely good ones to see these two as a duo, as well as parts of some of the other ones. It's pretty funny, and it's nice for Ryan to accept Graham as his step-grandfather. Series 12 doesn't really have much for the pair to do, and this is why Graham's not as awesome in Series 12 as Series 11, because he doesn't have a huge amount to do. But I do like some of Ryan's stuff where he does want to get back to his friends before he misses out on their lives and such. But I don't think this is expanded upon that much. This seems to be a problem. Series 12 has some really good ideas, but it either stuffs so much in that it couldn't do them just, or because so much was there, other ideas couldn't be developed as good as they could. Like Ryan maybe thinking about going so he could stay with so he could see his friends, was brought up in episode 7, and then it kind of disappears until the special Revolution of the Daleks. And then Yaz didn't get much characterization until Series 12, and then we only got some stuff more about her in Can You Hear Me, especially once the family had kind of been ignored, apart from Sonia. It is a bit of a shame that these characters couldn't have been expanded further upon in the time we got with them, apart from the Graham Ryan dynamic in Series 11, which was really cool. Dan, I feel like, has a similar problem, but we only had a limited time with him, so I think if there was an extended Series 13 as long as the other two, we could have had more with him. However, he's still fucking awesome, and that's mainly, again, down to John Bishop. Okay, people, the next comedian / panel host person who's hired to become a companion, we should not say we're expecting them not to be that great, because they're almost certainly going to turn out to be one of, if not the best companion of the era. We saw this with Catherine Tate, we saw it with Matt Lucas, and we saw it twice with this era with Bradley Walsh and John Bishop. If Frank Skinner had become a companion in Series 8, if his character had become a companion, we probably would have been, like, if we knew that was coming up, we'd probably be like what we were with the return of Donna or Nardo, or with the announcements of Bradley Walsh and John Bishop. We'd think, oh no, they won't be very good, and then they'd be absolutely amazing. Frank Skinner was definitely amazing in that one episode of Series 8 he was in. He would have made a brilliant companion on the lines of Bradley Walsh and John Bishop. So yeah, there you go. Don't always judge a book by its fucking cover, guys. Otherwise you'll go, because before you know it, you'll get yourself, if you say, oh, Catherine Tate's not going to be that great, and then suddenly you'll find out you're in love with her, and so much so that you're so excited to see her back in the 60th anniversary, after she became your favourite companion in the later Tennant era. Or Matt Lucas completely steals Series 10, or almost completely steals Series 10, and this goes twice for this era for Bradley Walsh and John Bishop as a combo. Heck, you get them even in the same episode, towards the end of the same episode of Power of the Doctor. So yeah, you get 2 for 1 in that, even if not for long. But yeah, John Bishop's Dan is great. I really love the character. I think most of my love comes from the evil Dan memes made by Doctor Who Poo. I suppose that's also some of my Graham love as well, with the "you're doing it, mate" memes. But the characters are so lovable and the actors are so charming in their own rights, then it's not hard to love them in the normal episodes, as well as make those funny memes, which makes us love them even more. Oh, they're just so good. I would have liked to see more of Dan's personal life a little bit more, but again, as we only had 9 episodes with him, more 8 and a bit, then I can understand if maybe Series 13 had 10 episodes and we had 1, maybe 2 specials afterwards, or maybe all 3 if we were lucky. Then, I know it's no fucking pandemic. Maybe we would have seen a bit more of his parents. Maybe we would have seen more of his relationship with Diane. But as we saw, it was still pretty sweet. So, yeah, the companions. Oh, and that's the main 3 companions. And we'll also throw in Captain Jack Harkness, Ace, and Tegan as returning previous companions. Captain Jack was handled pretty well in Revolution of the Daleks, pretty much how he was, similar to how he was in Series 3 and 4 in Torchwood, where his appearance in Fugitive of the Jadoon was basically fan baiting. But he did a bit more in Revolution, and John Barrowman was great when he came back. It's just a shame what was revealed about him a few months later after Revolution of the episode aired. If that had come a year earlier, we would not be as excited for the New Year special as we ended up being. Ace and Tegan, on the other hand, have yet to have anything bad about their actors come out publicly, and hopefully never. Well, because I don't want anything bad to come out of them. I hope they didn't do anything bad. But suffice to say, they were also handled really well in the episode they came back, and it was nice to see them have some grander roles, and it was, yeah. So Ace had Sophie Aldred, Janet Fielding, lovely to see them back, and lovely to have Ace and Tegan getting into the action. Also returning from the previous eras was Kate Stewart, who didn't do very much in Series 13 when she came back, but was pretty good in Power the Doctor, and it's also pretty great to see her back anyway. But Power the Doctor definitely utilised her better than Series 13 did. Redacted handled her a little bit differently, but that's not hugely relevant to the TV series. But yeah, Gemma Redgrave was also really great in her appearances, especially in Power the Doctor. Especially as it felt like this is her first time in the TARDIS. That was pretty cool for her. Apart from one of the last scenes of Power the Doctor, that's pretty much all of the returning companions. Though some honourable mentions do go to Vinder, a main reoccurring character in Flux, but he's not really a proper companion, and Professor Jericho, who's more like Yaz and Dan's companion rather than the Doctor's, but he's still probably the best character of Flux. Sorry, Dan and Carvanista. Carvanista is also a shout-out, as is Lee, as they seem to be companions of the Fugitive Doctor, who was introduced in Fugitive of the Jadoon, and like I said before, Jo Martin is pretty great as the Fugitive Doctor. It's just a shame that the character didn't have as much more to do besides gritting her teeth at the 13th Doctor in the first episode, and having only brief cameo appearances in her other 3 appearances in The Timeless Children, Once Upon a Time, and The Power of the Doctor. In the case of the first and last of those cases, that was inside the Matrix, and a hologram from taken from the Doctor's subconscious when she's about to cross that divide, and tying it in with whatever she was doing with the TARDIS and whatnot, and just making it look like the Fugitive Doctor, much like how Ace and Tegan got to see their main Doctors 7 and 5, respectively, for a little chat. Gosh, wouldn't it have been brilliant if 6 had appeared for a character as well, and we could have had a moment with all 3 80s Doctors, not including the 4th Doctor, talking to somebody. That would have been awesome. Oh yeah, and the Power of the Doctor is a multi-Doctor story. Woo! So cool, kind of, and not. No, I'm not including the regeneration at the end. As for the villains, Series 11 focused on original villains, apart from Resolution, and that was at the end. So Tim Shaw was a pretty effective and creepy villain in the first time he appeared, but became a bit dull in the second time he appeared. And the wrapping things, Remnants, whilst having a great voice by Ian Gelder, who would go on to play another villain in this era, Zelen, more on him later, that he weren't that greater villains on their own rights. Krasko was basically a space racist. The spiders were just giant spiders, like the maggots from the Green Death. They were creepy, but not hugely effective. Jack Robertson was basically a Donald Trump parody in that episode. Was a bit better in Revolution of the Daleks, and then just gets away with everything. I thought he might turn back up in Series 13 or the specials and somehow get some sort of punishment, or this time he wouldn't get away with it. Kind of a situation like, they get away with it, but how long? And then Series 13, 3 strikes you're out. Kind of a thing. Heck, I half expected him to be converted into a Cyberman, and a standard Cyberman, like a drone Cyberman, as opposed to like a Cyber Leader or something. Because that would be a humiliating defeat and death for Jack Robertson. If Jack Robertson ever comes back in any era, this is what we got to do with him. We have got to have him team up with and then get converted by the Cybermen. And ironically, he's just a plain old ordinary Cyberman, despite him trying to be like president or like really big, important rich guy. And he just, instead of becoming like a cyber leader or cyber controller or whatnot, he's just an ordinary Cyberman. How great of a comeuppance would that be? Moving on, the Pating. For some reason, everybody in the fan base seems to hate this creature. Is it because it's just a small little thing that eats a lot of stuff? I think there's worse monsters out there than the Pating, guys. I really do. I think the Pating was actually alright. And it was a good subversion of expectations in the episode, one of the stronger elements of that episode. And yeah, it was alright, yeah. I don't see why this one is widely considered one of the worst monsters of the show. It's definitely better than the Absorbanoff, and that's widely considered the worst, or one of the worst. So, yeah. The Vashavians they're not technically villains, they're actually allies. They're good. And Manish was the true villain of that story. Humans were the true villains of that story, and that was handled well. Then we got Charlie, who he was writing. I think he was fighting for the right things, but he was doing it in the wrong way, kind of a thing. Also, for those who think the 13th Doctor lets her companions get away, basically, this is a case of actually this is the villain getting a comeuppance, and the 13th Doctor gave him a chance, but he chose to get himself killed, basically. And a lot of people said, "Oh, the Doctor killed him," kind of thing. No, the Doctor gave him a chance. So let me get this straight: are you pissed off that the Doctor lets their villains go, or are you pissed off that the Doctor lets their villains die? Make your fucking mind up. Witchfinders, the Morax are boring, but Becca was pretty damn slimy, which made good elements to her before she was transformed. And also King James, I suppose, was kind of a villain as well, but Alan Cumming was fantastic. But he was a pretty fun character, and Alan Cumming was amazing. It Takes You Away, again, doesn't really have a proper villain. The Solitrax technically ended up becoming an ally. And also, again, I like the Solitrax. I think that was the best part of that episode. And Ribbons was just a dick. And those moth creatures were just kind of there. The Daleks were handled fantastically in this era. Maybe a little too fantastically in places, but Resolution was absolutely amazing return for them. Revolution of the Daleks ups this a little bit. Even the Daleks was great to keep having a refined number. And appreciated appearances in Flux, Once Upon a Time in The Vanquishers, and The Power of the Doctor. On to Series 12, and we've got a few more interesting villains in the terms of the returning Master, played by Sacha Dhawan, who is my favourite new Series 1 behind Derek Jacobi. But Lenny Henry's Daniel Barton was decent. Again, I was expecting him to come back because he got away, but maybe he'll come back. Orphan 55, the Dregs, no, they're okay for the story they serve. The design's not amazing, but it fits with what we're going with. The Skiffer are quite interesting, with them being extremely lazy to create their own stuff, so they force other people to do it, or they steal things, but they go to so much lengths in order to do that. and Anji Mahindra steals the show as the Skiffer Queen. The Jadoon are handled really well. I'm wondering why the captain has that mohawk, but besides that, they're handled pretty well, and it's interesting that they've been recruited by perhaps the wrong type of people, as or at least for the Doctor's point of view. Gat is also quite a creepy villain, and ties in with our Timeless Child division arc we're going to come to later on. The Praxis virus is basically COVID, but worse, believe it or not. And Suki Cheng is a misguided person who doesn't get really a chance to be redeemed. She ends up dying before redemption. Ian Gelder comes back to play Zelen, one of the Immortals, along with a fellow Immortal, who are pretty great villains. Mostly him, though the other one is kind of just there. Apparently even more powerful, but that kind of takes away from Zelen, who's already been built up as a great villain. But overall, he's great. Ashad is amazing. The Cybermen are handled pretty well in this era, more so in Power of the Doctor and Series 13 than in Series 12, but they're still handled pretty well. Out of the big three, I think they're handled the weakest, but they're still pretty great. I'm going to skip the Division and the Time Lords because I think they can speak for themselves. And then when we come to Flux, there's a whole bunch of characters. We've got the return of the Sontarans and the Weeping Angels, which are both handled really well. We've got the new villains, Swarm and Azure, who are amazing. We got Tek Tae-hoon, who's great when Barbara Flynn plays her in Survivors. And that's about it. There isn't really other... Oh, and the Grand Serpent's pretty slimy in the third episode, but when we come to his return in 5 and 6, it's not really needed. He's kind of there, really. I mean, I wouldn't mind it if he wasn't so involved with the whole unit stuff and just taking time away from more Dr. Tek Tae-hoon division stuff, or Yaz Dan and Jericho investigating the globe, or Carvanista and Bell doing their thing stuff, or the Sontarans. So, yeah, finally we have the Sea Devils, whose designs do look like they are trying to be faithful to the old ones, but as well as tying it into the time period, but they're handled terribly. So villains-wise, it's a bit of a mixed bag. New villains aren't handled that greatly in the first series, but series 12 and 13 ups this a little bit with the inclusion of characters like Zelen, Swarm and Azure, and the Grand Serpent. Even the Skiffer are pretty great. And Tim Shaw, of course. But the old villains are where Chris Chibnall and co. seem to shine, apart from the Sea Devils and maybe some instances of the Cybermen in Series 12, but overall, pretty damn brilliant. So it's really hard to kind of come to a final note with this era, because there's so many ups and downs, and I think I could say the same for many of the others. It's like the 12th Doctor especially. I could go on about Series 8 and 9 having so good and so bad episodes, and overall coming out on the lower end, and then 10 similar but going on a more positive level, and then so forth. But it's a very mixed bag of an era, both in stories, writing and direction, both in the series arcs and the era arc, character stuff and so forth. But it's still a pretty good era. I still enjoyed it. It may not be for everybody. I know that, willing or not. But it's still an enjoyable time for the most part, nevertheless. I do think there's quite a lot of good in here, even if there's some duds. And yeah, I don't think it's a write-off. I don't think it's an entire write-off of an era for Doctor or showrunner. Same with Moffat and Smith Capaldi, for example, or J&T and his Doctors. But yeah, there is definitely a lot of mixed bag stuff here, and there could have been a lot of improved stuff, especially on Series 12, where they had the time and amount of episodes to do so. At least Lux has the excuse of being hampered by the fucking pandemic. And specials that followed. But yeah, I am glad that there are episodes where they do put a lot of effort into trying to make it as good as they can, like whilst Flux is a bit flawed, they do try to do as best as they can with that 6-part story for them, or at least most of it. And Power of the Doctor is such an epic conclusion. It feels like this is their last go round. They gotta make this as the best they can type of episode. That was so good. And Series 11 does feel like a pretty good introductory series to, at least for this era and for newcomers or people who may have gone away during Smith or Capaldi's time. Maybe even after Tennant left, and maybe they've gotten a bit of interest now because the Doctor's a woman, or Stephen Moffat's left and Chris Chibnall's taken over. There's going to be some new stuff going on, etc., etc., etc. So they would have popped in for Series 11 and then maybe stuck with it if they felt it was for them, or maybe dipped out if they didn't feel like carrying it on for Series 12 or 13. So, in the regards of Series 11 being the first series for us, an introductory series, it succeeded, but it also fails as the first series of a 3-series arc. They don't really do much with the arc until Series 12, and even then it's a bit fast and loose. But the characters are handled well, apart from Yaz to begin with, but she gets better, and then Ryan and Graham go down a little bit, but they're still okay. And then Series 13, great stuff. It is a bit of a mixed bagness, but it's still good for the most part. A few duds, a few not so great ones, a few in the middles, but a few good but with problems. But yeah, it's a good era overall. I think good with a few problems. I know not everybody's going to agree. I know some people didn't really get into this era. I know some people who absolutely adored it. But yeah, I found it to be a pretty good era overall. I wouldn't say it's solid, but it's a pretty good era. Like I said, if I was ranking all 39 seasons, these would come mid to late 20s, maybe Series 12's early 30s. Mid to high 20s at the absolute highest for Series 11 and 13. But yeah, I think it's going to be about mid to late 20s on a 39 season ranking. Sorry, Jodie stands. And sorry, haters who would have liked it to look like them to be bottom 3. Tough. Anyway, that's it for my conclusion and my 13th Doctor reflections. Thank you so much for watching. That's the end of this series. Don't forget to check out the other videos if you haven't already. And if you have, then please stay tuned for my review of the 2022 BBC Centenary special, The Power of the Doctor, as well as the ranking of the 2022 specials, as well as an updated top 10 stories of the 13th Doctor's era coming up later on down the line. Either later this month or next month. But you'll definitely get a Power of the Doctor review, which will go more in depth with that story, hopefully, if I'm not for talking about it more. The ranking of the 2022 specials, and then the top 10 episodes of the 13th Doctor's era ranking, and then that's it. We are covered for the 13th Doctor's era in the reviews. Until then, thank you so much for watching these reflections, and I'll see you guys next time. Goodbye. Also, as you can see, I dressed for the occasion. Don't forget to click below to subscribe to the Nicholas Payne YouTube channel.